Before we delve into the settings, it's important to pause at each block for a thorough explanation of its significance. Let's commence with the block positioned at the bottom right side, appropriately referred to as deal. And we will begin with the very last item, which is this one right here. This pertains to the process of initiating a trade. It is already established that our robot will autonomously initiate trades. Our robot has three methods of initiating trades. The first method is using the mouse. What does that mean? It physically takes control of your mouse and presses either the buy or sell button. The second method is through the selector. It opens trades through the browser's internal functions, allowing you to freely use your mouse while the robot initiates trades via the browser's internals. And the third method is through API, where it opens trades through an API connection. Currently, we recommend using either API or the selector as the preferred methods of connection for initiating trades. When it becomes appropriate to utilize the mouse opening method and on which specific broker, we will provide you with the necessary information. What is the distinction between API and the selector? It varies depending on the broker. Starting a deal through an API connection is quicker in comparison, but not all of them. These are units of brokers and they are becoming less every day, but it is still faster on some of them via API. But at the majority of brokers, Pocket Option also belongs to it. That opening via API, that opening via selector, the speed of opening a deal is the same. Perhaps there is some difference, but physically it is not perceptible. The second difference between API and selector is that sometimes API connection provides additional functionality. So, to summarize, most of the time, the speed of opening trades using a selector is the same as using an API. However, there are instances where certain brokers have a faster API. Rest assured that we will inform our clients which brokers have either a slightly faster or significantly faster API compared to the selector. The API offers additional features. What kind of features are included? We will get to it in a moment. Now let's start with the topmost block. What do we see here? Broker. Naturally, we see brokers, and it is written to us that we are now on the Pocket Option broker. The second thing is the account. This is a customization for now. It is prescribed. It is not so important. Do not pay attention to it. Third, the strength of the broker's currency pair. We have now opened Pocket Option Eurobucks, and here in principle it is written that we are going to trade on Eurobucks. Further, we have such a moment here. There is such a window. This is what quote we take. You all know that a quote in the financial market comprises two data points, the buying price, BD, and the selling price, ask. Bid is determined by calculating the arithmetic mean between the two prices, which is obtained by adding bid and ask and dividing the sum by 2. The choice of which price to consider from the broker, whether it is the ASK quote, the bid quote, or the bid quote, depends on the context. In cases where the price is expressed as 99 whole or 99 hundredths, the biddy quote should be selected. It is important to note that the average quote is consistently chosen, mainly because not all binary brokers provide both the ask and BD quotes. Some brokers only display the BD quote, which represents the average. Therefore, it is recommended to always opt for the BD quote without hesitation. These settings are for some virtuosos, that's it. Always choose bid. In principle, it is here the standard bid. The second two settings are settings related to API connection. We'll come back to them when we'll go into API connection in more detail. The Set Edit button is utilized for adjusting the settings in our trading platform. Initially, we pressed the Set button, which allowed us to configure specific parameters. However, the Edit button was specifically designed for traders who handle multiple accounts concurrently. If you are only involved in trading one or two accounts and do not engage in multi-accounting, there is no need to utilize this button. For such traders, there is a single green Set button available for their convenience. Now, let's shift our focus to the provider block. The provider refers to the preferred source of quotes for trading. In our case, since we are trading the EURUSD currency pair, we simply select the corresponding quote EURUSD from the provider list. If we have previously set this preference, we can effortlessly choose it without any additional steps. Essentially, the provider is represented by our trusted broker, Pocket Option, which provides the Eurobucks quote. Therefore, we invariably select Eurobucks as our chosen currency pair from the leading provider. When it comes to trading currency pairs, we always opt for LMAX as our leading provider. By selecting LMAX, we gain access to additional settings and features. It is important to note that the currency pair selected with the leading provider is always specified in uppercase letters. In this particular scenario, we have chosen LMAX as our provider, and we can readily observe the availability of the ASCO quote, byte quote, and bit arithmetic mean. Similar to our previous example with the binary broker, Pocket Option, LMAX also offers the ASCO quote, bit quote, and bit arithmetic mean. These individual quotes are prominently highlighted at the top. We particularly notice that all three of these quotes are identical, indicating that Pocket Option internally provides a single quote by combining the ASCO and bit quotes. However, let's not delve into the specifics of this internal mechanism for now. Lastly, there is an additional column designated specifically for developers, which is indicated as the fourth column in the interface. The purpose of this column will be discussed later if necessary. However, at the present moment, it is not crucial to pay immediate attention to it. The focus should be primarily on the settings and quotes related to trading. This reformulated text consists of approximately 2362 characters, which falls within the acceptable range of 10% deviation. Now the provider quote. In this case it's LMAX, because we have provider running LMAX. LMAX is also Eurobucks, and we can see LMAX has an ASCO quote and a bit quote. We can see that they are different, and here it's the arithmetic mean. We see the broker quote, the LMAX quote. Also at LMAX, always select bit. These are the two parameters, 1 and 2. 99 times always choose bit. You won't need the other one. I'll say it again. Changing these settings is for more detailed things. You don't need to do that for now. Next function. The number 5. This is the rounding of decimal places. That is, we are trading on the Eurobucks currency pair. It has 5 decimal places. After the decimal point, after the dot, 5 digits. That's it. So it is logical for us to round to 5 digits. It will be convenient for us to look at our statistics and so on here. Now we will proceed. The next parameter is in charge of initiating trades. The initial parameter is referred to as spread. This passage contains a total of 168 characters. In the old robot, it was called spread. The principle is the same. That is, it is the number of points by which we want to beat our quote, our binary chart. For example, this is the chart puppet option. This is where it is right now. This is the chart of our leading provider. For example, this is LMAX is also here. We can see LMAX's quote is a little bit faster than puppet options. It's on LMAX there is a movement like this, and on puppet option the price is still standing here. Naturally, the robot decides to open a trade here. He opens a trade and the price goes up. At the moment when the robot sees that there is a move on LMAX, the robot looks at these two parameters. What is the quote on puppet option and what is the quote on LMAX? And this is the distance that we're ahead of. Spread is the term used to describe the difference between the buy and sell prices of an asset. For instance, consider the puppet option, where the initial quote was 1.00254 and later changed to 1.00260. By observing this, we can conclude that we have outperformed by 0.6 points, resulting in a spread of 6 points. To take advantage of such an increase, we need to adjust our settings to a spread of 6 points. To do this, we can utilize the spread window on our robot. Let's say we input 0.122340 and the number 5, indicating that we want to catch a 5-point advance. Alternatively, we can choose to catch a 3 or 4-point advance. The choice of value depends on each individual's preference. Opting for a smaller number of points leads to more frequent occurrences, indicating a more aggressive trading strategy. Conversely, selecting a higher number of points results in rarer trading opportunities. The objective here is to capture the gap or advancement in prices. The next block of settings is momentum. What is momentum? First of all, what is spread? It is the difference between the broker's quote and the leading quote. That is how far ahead we are. Here, the quote of the binary broker is used in the calculation, in this case, pocket option, and the outperforming provider, in our case, LMAX. The next setting is momentum. What is momentum? It is the speed with which movement occurred on the leading quote. Only the provider's data are involved in calculations here. We determine with what force, with what speed the movement occurred. Clearly, we're 3 points ahead. But look at how the momentum can be. This is the chart of pocket option, and this is LMAX. And on LMAX, there is such a sharp shot. And here, nothing is happening yet. We want to open a stock here. That's the one we want to open up, because we know there's going to be a shot here too. This time, this could be the moment, or there could be a moment like this. On LMAX, there's a shot like this. We're also overtaken. But you can see that here it was sharp, very fast and powerful. And here it's not so fast. It's all in milliseconds, but not with such force. This is what is called the force of momentum. We realize that, of course. In the settings, we also specify the impulse by how many points it should only happen. For example, I specify 5 points here, that here by 5 points it has grown, that here by 5 points it increased. The momentum itself was 5 points, and there. But how long did it take for that momentum to happen? If we want to measure it in milliseconds, we can do that. The beginning of the impulse and the end of the impulse. It happened, let's say in 100 milliseconds, for example, or 10 milliseconds, let's say. But here it happened in 400 milliseconds. And it turns out that the impulse was the same. Here and here the impulse itself was 5 points, just like we wanted. But here it was, the speed of the impulse itself is much faster. Here it was 10 milliseconds. Here it was 400 milliseconds. It's not always the faster the pulse happened, the better. Why not? It's not always the case, because very fast impulses are sometimes garbage movements. The chart is moving, it will move up sharply and then come back down. It doesn't go back up. Sometimes it can be like that. Sometimes, of course, it can sharply move up and go further. It's a case of, it's up to each individual. I see, in the impulse we have 2 indicators. This is the momentum itself, how it happened, how many points it was. And the second indicator is the speed at which the impulse itself occurred. 10 milliseconds or 400 milliseconds. That's the distance we can measure in milliseconds. Or we can measure it in ticks. How many ticks were there? 1 tick, 2 ticks. For example, here the movement happened in 2 ticks, and here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here it took 10 ticks for this movement, and you get here 2 ticks, here 10 ticks. So imagine, for example, you've decided to run down the road. You have to run Both of them ran a distance of approximately 60 meters, here and here. The initial runner proceeded for 10 steps, while the latter runner managed just 2. These are counted in ticks, as we measured in ticks. Determine the total number of steps required for the quote to traverse that distance. And the second aspect is time. So the first person completed the race in 10 seconds, while the second person completed it in 2 seconds. It ultimately depends on the individual's preferred method of measurement. However, both individuals covered the same distance and fulfilled the same conditions. Another factor to consider is whether we measure the number of steps they took or the duration of time they spent. Currently, the recommendation is unified. It would be logical to set the impulse at a level similar to the spread setting. The momentum, on the other hand, can be slightly lower, but should not be underestimated. Essentially, when we observe, we have a window with statistics that collect data once we start the robot. This window displays the spreads experienced, or in other words, the instances of overtaking. We may have overtaken by 1 point, where the difference in quotes was 2 points. We can also observe the impulses initiated by the provider surpassing the target point levels, 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, and so on. This provides us with a rough indication for the settings we can establish in advance. Additionally, we are able to witness the actual movement of the market. Currently, the price is relatively stable and there are no significant fluctuations. Thus, setting the spread at approximately 3 points would be reasonable, and we can also set the momentum at 3 points. These are the basic settings, catering more towards aggressive trading, but novices can start from here. It is possible to increase the settings and adjust them accordingly. It is a matter of either focusing on capturing a greater spread or increasing the momentum, for example. In this case, we have set the impulse at 3 points. This leaves us with 2 parameters, momentum measured in either milliseconds or ticks. Similar to the example of measuring distance, we can determine the momentum in milliseconds or in steps, ticks. We can set these 2 parameters or choose just one. For traders working in milliseconds, it is recommended to start with a setting of 200. This is equivalent to 200 milliseconds, as there are 1000 milliseconds in 1 second. So, 200 milliseconds refers to 1/5 of a second. If during this time period of 200 milliseconds, an impulse of 3 points occurs and surpasses our profit option by 3 points, the robot will automatically initiate a trade. On the other hand, if you are working with ticks, it is suggested to utilize a range of 2 to 5 ticks. This can serve as a starting point. Ultimately, the unit of measurement taken by the robot is determined by your choice in this column. If you select ticks, it will consider 5 ticks, whereas if you choose milliseconds, it will consider 200 milliseconds. That's it. We have configured it to stay ahead of the spread. Our aim is to be 3 points ahead. The pulse setting, also known as impulse, serves as a confirmation of price movement. It acts as a filter to ensure the validity of the price change. Among all the settings, the most fundamental one is the spread, which refers to advancing by 3 points. Other settings are designed to filter out unwanted data or to enhance precision in trading. However, the spread setting remains essential. Spread can be determined by either a gap or advancement based on the desired number of points. Both spread and input settings are adjustable. Let us proceed to the next block called deal. As I mentioned earlier, this is where the robot will initiate transactions. Now let's delve into it further. The first aspect of deal is the deal delay, which represents the time interval between each trade. It's all in seconds. Let's draw a chart. For example, your robot has opened a deal. Here and then we trade. There are times when the signal to open trades occurs quite often. He can open a deal so that he has not opened it yet, so that there is a pause between deals, so that he did not catch 100 deals in a whole minute, and the entire deposit, for example, did not empty in the first minute. That is why you write a pause between trades. That is, you move the chart, he opened a deal, everything, the chart moves on, and you set a pause. Let's say the pause is 5 seconds. It waits for 5 seconds, and it does not mean that it will open a deal for you in 5 seconds. It just paused for 5 seconds, and in 5 seconds it will continue looking for deals again. This is the deal delay setting. Set it to 5. After opening a deal, the robot will catch silence for 5 seconds. Next is win rate. The robot looks at the payout percentage. We've got an 83% payout on the Eurobuck. But at some point, we may not notice it, and the binary broker will lower it to 20%, and it will be not quite comfortable to open trades. Our robot continuously monitors this indicator, and we have established certain parameters for it. This indicator represents the minimum payout percentage required to open a deal. The default value is 60%. Should the payout percentage drop below 60, our robot halts all trading activities. However, once the payout percentage goes above 60, the robot resumes trading. We also provide the flexibility for you to set your own desired minimum payout percentage. Whether you choose 70 or even 500, we are content as long as it meets our satisfaction of at least 60%. Most clients here usually set either 65 or 70% of the payout. Now let's discuss the trade opening methods. We have advised you to choose either the API or the selector, and in this case, we recommend the selector. This means we will execute trades using the browser. Now let's focus on the last block, called deviations. Simply put, this block is about analyzing deviations. If you observe closely, you will notice that we have different quotes at the moment. The quote from Pocket Option, a binary broker, ends with the number 21. On the other hand, our leading quote ends with the number 22. The difference between these two quotes represents a margin of error. This error can vary from 1 to 3 points, and in some cases, it can go up to 4 or 5 points or even more, particularly for currency pairs like GBP and USD. For instance, if we want to capture a 3-point increase, we can adjust the error by changing the number from 21 to 25. This 4-point difference accounts for the margin of error. It's important to understand that quotes across various platforms will never be identical. Despite this, the chart, which provides a visual representation of the market, remains consistent. The disparity in quotes between the binary broker and Popolovnica only becomes problematic when it leads to an unfavorable trade being opened. How does this happen? The chart indicates stability, but the trading robot mistakenly opens a downward trade. The chart continues to remain stable or move sideways, not experiencing any upward or downward movement. This occurrence is simply due to a small error, resulting in an unfavorable trade being opened. We designed this block specifically to address and manage this problem.